Well, welcome. Thanks for joining me for episode 187, Business and Legal Week in Review. This is UTLRadio.com, your business success and legal information station. I'm your host, Peter Lamont, along with my co-host, Bob Hughes. So today we're going to be talking about... how you doing, Bob?
I'm good.
So far, you're good. We'll see how it goes at the end of the show.
Certainly.
Yeah. So we're going to try to get through some of the stories that happened last week. A lot of stuff going on in the world, but on the legal and business front, some things that I think are pretty important to talk about. So we're going to get to that in a second. But before we begin, I just want to thank today's sponsor. And today's show is sponsored by beasmartclient.com. So let me just explain what this is about and why this is so important to anyone who has the need for a lawyer. You see, as a client, you don't really understand what the lawyer is doing, what kind of lawyer to look for, why things are taking so long, why there's so much, process and procedure. And I think that sometimes makes it very difficult on the client end to understand exactly what's going on with your case, with your matter. It doesn't make a difference whether it's a will or a trial. You just don't know what's going on. And I think it's really, really important for you to understand how to have the best relationship that you can with your lawyer, because understanding more about what your lawyer is doing and the legal process is only going to benefit you. It's going to reduce the stress. And that's what beasmartclient.com is about. There is a book on the site that you can purchase right from the site or from Amazon. And basically, it's going to give you that roadmap, that guideline to help you understand how to have a relationship with your client. One of the main complaints that happen between attorneys and clients throughout the U.S. is lack of communication. And a lot of times it's because the client doesn't understand what's going on and they're afraid to ask, or they're not sure when to ask. And maybe the lawyer thinks to himself or herself, well, this is routine for me. I know that this is going to happen in this case. So why do I need to report it? It's just, par for the course. But the client doesn't understand that. So that's what this book and this website is going to help you with. Whether you want a simple will or you're looking at a lengthy lawsuit, knowing what to expect and how to effectively communicate with your attorney saves you time and money. Even if you're going it alone, there are easy techniques and useful tools in this book that are going to help you feel far more confident and in any legal matter that you're going to be dealing with. So, Bob, you've talked about some of the times in the past where you've had to employ a lawyer, and not being a lawyer, I think that something like this book probably would have helped you understand more what was going on.
Oh, absolutely. To me, being a lawyer is similar to a witch doctor or voodoo craft because you don't know what they're doing, and they speak a different language. But it is, I've been pretty fortunate that I've had friends recommend lawyers here or lawyers there, depending on the situation. But yeah, if you don't have people that, and sometimes I work with one, not having people in the know can really hurt you. And it's like anything, you've got to research it. And a great source like this book is absolutely infallible and detrimental. You need it if you're going to move forward in the business world or just in life, actually. I mean, you're going to find yourself in trouble one way or another, and this will help you get out of it.
Absolutely. And you know what? If you go to the site, actually, there's an app coming soon that looks pretty cool. There's some companion workbooks. So, if you have the need for a lawyer for whatever it is, like I said, will or litigation or a contract dispute, or you're being sued or you need to sue, you are always going to be in a better position knowing more and knowing how to effectively communicate with your lawyer. So check out beasmartclient.com and pick up a copy of the book by Ellen Hughes, Be a Smart Client, Your Guide to Successful Relationships with Your Attorney. So thanks to Be a Smart Client, and I do encourage everyone who has the need for a lawyer to take a look at the book. It's available at Amazon.com and on beasmartclient.com.
And what's comical about my current situation when it comes to legal maneuvering is opposition has recently changed lawyers. Had they just been a smart client in the first place, and actually gave me exactly what I wanted when it came to the paperwork, had they just been a smart client in the first place and referenced this website, we wouldn't have had to play around.
That's right. Absolutely. So before we get going,
it helps.
Good. Before we get going into the news today, I just want to mention a couple things that have happened over the past few weeks. We've had some really, really great interviews on our Understanding Business show. We had Rich Gaspari, and we gave away a book. We had Michael Brunette from Beard Bro, which really was a great interview, a really great guy. And he gave a lot of information, a lot of advice about being an entrepreneur and how to start a company and what he did and how he managed having a full-time job. So that's a great show. You can check that show out. That's available either. There's so many ways to get it. You can go to UTLRadio.com and there's links. You can go to Blog Talk Radio and there's links. You can find excerpts from it on YouTube. So wherever it's easier for you, we're there. But check out some of those interviews because they were really, really high-quality interviews with a lot of really good information. Mike Brunette especially was really enlightening, and it kind of shed some sort of knowledge on some of those sectors or those sections of entrepreneurship where you don't really spend much time. You see the big picture, but he was talking about some of the details, and that's where the devil is. So check those interviews out. We also had a number of giveaways. I mentioned Rich Gaspari giveaway. Beard Bro giveaway is still ongoing. So we have 5 Beard Bro tools to give away, courtesy of Mike Brunette and Beard Bro LLC. So check that out. All the terms and conditions for entering that giveaway are available at utlradio.com. That's going to do it for housekeeping. And you're up, Bob.
Now that everything's clean, it's time to eat. Chocolatiers Prevail in candy price fix. Now you get my food reference. In Pittsburgh, Courthouse News is telling us that evidence suggesting possible multinational collusion between Hershey, Mars, and Nestle, 3 of my favorite people, to fix chocolate bar prices could just as easily be proof of their interdependence. The third court has ruled, tossing out an antitrust suit against the candy giants. Tuesday's decision by the 3-judge panel ended a long and complicated case that began in 2007 with the consolidation of 91 multi-district lawsuits filed primarily by local grocery stores and pharmacies, basically complaining that the prices of a bit of honey is the same as a Snickers bar and across the different lines of candy manufacturers to their wholesale. Cadbury, which was also named as a defendant when the suits were consolidated, was dismissed from the action in 2011. U.S. District Judge Christopher Connor dismissed that entire case during that year. Explaining the panel's decision to uphold Connor's ruling, U.S. Circuit Judge Michael Fisher wrote that there essentially rested on 2 simple factors. First, the people involved in and the circumstances surrounding the Canadian conspiracy are different from those involved in and surrounding the purported U.S. conspiracy, Fisher said. Second, the evidence that the chocolate manufacturers in the U.S. knew of the unlawful Canadian conspiracy and is weak and, in any event, relates only to Hershey's and no one else, he continued. Because we also conclude that the plaintiff's other traditional conspiracy evidence is insufficient to create reasonable inference that a U.S. price-fixing conspiracy existed. We affirm that. And so according to the consolidated complaint, Hershey's, Mars, and Nestle's controlled 75% of the confectionery market between 2002 and 2007, which are the years the alleged price fixing was said to have occurred. Given the market concentration and high barriers to entry, the U.S. chocolate confectionery market was ripe for collusion. But evidence of motive without more does not create a reasonable inference of concerted action because it merely restates interdependence, Fisher wrote. The plaintiffs did not dispute the prices for making chocolate increase during those years, but they have claimed to have uncovered sufficient evidence of parallel pricing to prevail on their claims. The 3-judge panel held that the evidence presented was far too circumstantial to prove that the plaintiff's conspiracy theory. Additionally, while the plaintiffs claimed that chocolate companies agreed not to poach each other's existing customer accounts, so that said, hey, I'm not going to take yours, you don't take mine, the panel concluded the parallel price increases that were supposedly part of that bargain are not uncommon in the candy industry. A horizontal price fixing agreement occurs when competitors in the same market agree to fix or control prices of their goods or services. Conduct consistent with permissible competition, as with illegal conspiracy, does not, standing alone, support an inference of antitrust conspiracy. Importantly, he continued, Even when armed with plausible economic theory, a plaintiff relying on ambiguous evidence alone cannot raise a reasonable inference of a conspiracy sufficient to survive summary judgment. While the plaintiffs built their case on a logical enough foundation, he said, the panel found that the evidence did not exclude the possibility that the defendants were working interdependently. Even though this practice of parallel pricing, known as conscious parallelism, produces anti-competitive outcomes, it is lawful under the Sherman Act for two reasons, Fisher wrote. First, conscious parallelism is not an agreement, but can be a necessary fact of life, saying that it's going to happen. Second, the courts have no effective remedy for the problem. Accordingly, evidence of conscious parallelism cannot alone create a reasonable inference of a conspiracy. The opinion describes the U.S. chocolate market as a textbook example of an oligopoly. I'm going to guess on that word. That's kind of the word of the week also. Also, an oligarchy is like the word of the day. And the panel decided that we cannot infer too much from mere. Have you seen that in news? I'm serious. In news reports, everyone's an oligarch. Everyone's an oligarch all of a sudden. And the panel decided that we cannot infer too much from mere evidence of parallel pricing from oligopolists. In a concentrated or oligopolistic market, I'm not even knowing if that's how it's pronounced, a single firm's change in output or price will have a noticeable impact on the market and its rival. Oligopolists, kind of like philanthropists, may maintain super competitive pricing through rational interdependent decision making, as opposed to unlawful concerted action if the oligopolists independently concluded that the industry as a whole would be better off by raising prices. Basically, they're saying this happens and we can't fix it. It's just because everyone buys the sugar at the same price. It's because everyone has the same cost in labor. There's no way to control this. Isn't that pretty much what they're saying?
Yeah, that's really what it's about. Basically, what let's go back to the Sherman Antitrust Act for a second. So the Sherman Antitrust Act, which is a federal law, it basically tries to prevent. It's an anti-competition statute, basically. Okay, the idea of fair competition is what we want our capitalist society to encourage. We want people to compete with each other because competition will bring better products, better services, and generally speaking, better prices. So the antitrust law tries to prevent organizations who might have most of the power from price fixing or for setting the bar at a level where there's no competition. So that's basically
kind of like OPEC.
What's that?
It's kind of like OPEC.
Yeah, exactly like OPEC. So the idea here is that we want a competitive market. We don't want something that's anti-competitive, which is what the Sherman Act is there to try to protect. So this lawsuit basically stems from the idea that people believe that the prices were fixed and it didn't make a difference where you went, whether it was Hershey or Nestle or any of these companies, you're going to pay the same price. And in essence, there is no competition. But what the judge ruled is, and it was a 52-page opinion. So this is something that they took tremendously seriously. You would think that it almost sounds kind of silly, but the court took this extremely seriously. 52-page opinion, and they basically say that there's no questions of fact to submit to the jury. So while it may look to you, the plaintiff, that all the prices are the same across the board, it really is a result not of some sort of knowing collusion where we're going to fix all the prices of candy throughout the industry. It really is, well, wait a minute, if Mars brings their price down, then we should bring our price down as Hershey, and you're allowed to do that. It's when you kind of get together in like, the chocolate factory and you say, all right, let's do this. Let's screw everyone over. And, whether it's an M&M or a Hershey bar or a Cadbury egg, we're all going to charge this amount. Agree? That's what the plaintiff was alleging. And the judge said that we can't find any evidence to support that.
And the Sherman Antitrust Act is fairly, it's been around for a while.
Yeah, actually, it was passed under Harrison. Benjamin Harrison was the president at the time. So I think that was like in the 1890s. So that's been around for a long time. But again, the whole idea, because it's during the Industrial Revolution, and we're talking about trying to increase competition because it's going to make everybody better. And, imagine an economic culture or a capitalist society where everybody's working together, at a standard price. It becomes more like a communist society in a sense, because there's
Dirty word.
Yeah, I know. There's no competition. So, who can outdo the other? That's really what our country is based on. And then, of course, there's always stepping over each other on your way to making something better. But that's not.
Yes.
That's not part of today's discussion.
No, and this can actually work in two ways. It can be utilized to keep people out of the market. If they, if you've got a startup and their price, if you should be making them at 45 cents a piece, well, if you can drop it down and take, these larger companies are making so much, they can pull it back to 42. Those 3 cents over a lot of units is a big deal. Now, once you effectively cut everyone out of the market when it comes to pre-sale, now you can raise your price and force a higher profit. So it can work in two different ways, and people don't necessarily see both ways because it can really keep people out of the market. It's kind of like the oil and gas industry. It's so lucrative that it's surprising that there's not more people in it.
Yeah. Well, I think that the source, having the oil obviously is a problem. And just, it seems like if you're not a very wealthy prince or princess or a king, you're going to have a hard time. But yeah,
and that's, I mentioned OPEC because that's exactly what they're doing to the U.S. oil and gas market when it comes to shale. They're pulling down the price of their crude to make it impossible to manufacture any other product that rivals it via fracking or other processes here in the U.S.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why alternatives to oil really should be at the forefront of what we are researching. I was away this weekend in upstate New York, and I was in a hotel, and in the back of the hotel, they had one electric charging port for, an electric vehicle. And, they put one in, so there must be enough that it would necessitate one. But you would just, I can't really wrap my head around why we are not doing more quickly to rid ourselves of that need for oil. And I wonder, is there more at play from a political standpoint? Why wouldn't we be spending all of our time and energy in alternate energy, studies?
You're right, yeah. In developing, between hydrogen fuel cells, the electric or whatever, yeah, there are reasons that are, I'm sure, aligned that it's not going to happen. No, I can't imagine what the hit to any kind of job market would be without oil and gas. If you pull those jobs,
yeah, absolutely.
Would they be replaced by alternatives? So it's hard. Oh, I'm sure if you follow the money, you get your answer.
Yep, that's right.
As with anything. Well, not the only product in the news this week that you start to look at from a legal standpoint. Dark and Stormy. Do you know what the Dark and Stormy is?
No, I actually don't know what Dark and Stormy is.
I didn't until I read this article. Dark and Stormy maker brings on trademark action. Courthouse News up in Boston telling us that if you're tired of Pernod Ricard ripping off its classic cocktail, the Dark and Stormy, well, Premier he got tired of it. Their premier spirits maker wanted some federal court injunction action. Gosling Brothers filed the federal complaint Tuesday against Pernod Ricard, the makers of Malibu rum, for trademark infringement. It says the official recipe for a Dark and Stormy calls for 1.5 ounces of Gosling's Black Seal rum and 4 to 5 ounces of any brand ginger beer. Using any other brand of rum, it's incorrect, according to Gosling's lawsuit. In October 2014, however, Pernod published a recipe on its website for a Dark and Stormy that used Malibu rum rather than Gosling's to die for. Defendants' actions are knowing, willful, deliberate, and performed with the interest to trade off of Gosling's goodwill and reputation tied to the iconic Dark and Stormy marks. The federal complaint states they're doing it on purpose. Defendants' wrongful conduct has caused or will cause Gosling to lose control over the goodwill and reputation associated with the Dark and Stormy marks. Bill Gosling first established its Dark and Stormy trademark in 1991 when the company began marketing a pre-made cocktail drink of the same name. It says the drink's history extends much earlier. More recently, the company has expanded its trademark to cocktail kits, clothing, and the recipe itself. The company traces its roots to James Gosling's landing in the Bermudas during a failed 1806 expedition from England to Virginia. Being that bad of a navigator would definitely prompt you to want to get into some other line of business. The son of a wine and spirits merchant, Gosling remained on the island and founded a rum company. Gosling Brothers, as the business became known, began bringing rum distillate to Bermuda in 1850, according to the complaint. Now, the company claims to owe its export business and its Black Seal rum brand name to a stroke of genius after World War I. While tourists looking to bring home rum from Bermuda, Gosling Brothers began reclaiming champagne bottles from a local mess hall for British officers, filling them up with rum and then sealing the recorked bottles with black wax. While British soldiers in post-war Bermuda began mixing ginger beer from a local factory operated by the Royal Navy Officers Club with Gosling's Black Seal rum to invent the Dark and Stormy, according to the complaint. Well, the Dark and Stormy is one of a few cocktails with trademarked recipes. The Sazerac, I'm going to guess that's how that is, I've never heard of that drink, which is owned by a spirit company with the same name, includes Sazerac rye whiskey and is referred to by the company's website as the official cocktail of New Orleans. Another famed New Orleans cocktail, the Hand Grenade, was the subject of a lawsuit that the Bourbon Street Bar Tropical Isle brought against other Louisiana restaurants that were infringing upon its recipe. Pusser's Rum successfully sued a New York City bar infringing on its drink, the Painkiller. The bar was operating as the Painkiller Lounge, while also serving its own version of the cocktail using different rum than Pusser's, as explained in an open letter from Pusser's founder, Charles Tobias, on the company's website. So basically, Peter, what you have here is whether or not you can copyright or trademark a name and a recipe associated with it.
Yeah, and it's something that people don't often think about, but you absolutely, if you come up with a recipe and you're going to name it something, it's more, because trademark is a word, a symbol, a phrase, something used to identify something that is specific and particular to a manufacturer or a product. So while you could create the same ingredients in a Dark and Stormy using a different type of rum. Okay, so it's essentially the same drink, just with a different brand of rum. You can't call it Dark and Stormy. You can call it whatever you want. You can call it, hazy and rainy. You can go whatever you want to call it, but you can't take their identifier, because that's what it is. It's a brand identifier. So they're saying that Dark and Stormy is not just a drink. It is a trademarked identifier that relates to their product specifically. So you can do a play on words or a variation of it, but you can't take their same, trademarked name. And that name, the Dark and Stormy, because I didn't know before this story what a Dark and Stormy was, but that phrase was trademarked and therefore protected. So it doesn't seem to make sense to me why people would. I think really is what I was going to say is I don't really understand why people would take a chance where they're going to end up with a possible injunction lawsuit. And I think it really is people don't know. Like the Painkiller Lounge, if I remember that litigation properly, I think that they didn't realize it wasn't like an intentional thing, like let's infringe on their trademark. I think it was accidental, but intent really isn't part of a trademark dispute. It's whether or not, the infringing use could potentially cause damage to the trademark holder.
So they can't, you're basically saying they take the Dark and Stormy. They can't say they can't really literally say this is our Dark and Stormy, or they can't call it a Malibu Dark and Stormy. They have to completely disassociate the name. They could publish the recipe using their own ingredients, but they can't call it a Dark and Stormy in any way, shape, or form. Exactly.
And that's why if you see an example being something like a generic vitamin, so you go into Rite Aid or CVS or Walgreens and you'll see Centrum vitamins, and then you'll see the store brand and it says compare to Centrum. They're not calling it Centrum because Centrum is trademarked, but they're going to call it, Centrovite, And then there's a little thing on it that says compare to Centrum. So by doing that, you avoid infringing on a mark because you're not calling your product the same thing. And the compare to Centrum doesn't really mean anything from a trademark standpoint. Because when they say compare to Centrum on the bottle, you'll see the little registered symbol next to the use of the word Centrum. So it's not used, it doesn't diminish business, it doesn't do what infringing use of a trademark would do. And it's very similar to this. So you could almost, in theory, see someone producing a drink and saying something like, compared to a Dark and Stormy, and that would probably be okay to say.
And using the term Dark and Stormy or Centrum like that doesn't obligate you to pay them any royalties.
No, because you don't have a licensing agreement. You don't have anything with them. They're just saying, stop, it's not right. I'll give you an example of something that I'm dealing with right now. There is a company who used to work with another company. And at that point that they were working together, they had an agreed upon licensing deal where company B was allowed to use company A's logo. So they end up splitting apart, going their separate ways, and company B, in an advertisement that goes out to tens of thousands of people, references and uses company A's logo and mark. So at one point, they were licensed to use that mark, but at the point that it was severed, they no longer have the ability to use that. And by placing that logo and mark in an advertisement, they have now infringed on company A's trademark. So that's just another spin on this. You might have licensing at one point, but it doesn't mean you have it forever. And just because you used it yesterday when you were part of a licensing agreement and today you're not, doesn't give you the right to use the mark.
The old words in perpetuity were not mentioned.
That's right.
Yeah, well, that's it. I mean, it's you don't like say you don't think about it, and it's probably very easy to do. And this one, I have to believe maybe they did mean to take advantage of a trademark name, but knowing something, it's like saying if Absolute for some reason you would be dumb enough to put, or Sky Vodka dumb enough to put orange juice with one of those two vodkas, you can't. You can put Screwdriver on but you're infringing on somebody else that said, "Hey, Screwdriver is my name."
Right.
You can put vodka and orange juice on there all day long. Don't use the term OJ because then Gene Simmons got something for you. But you can use those general terms. You just can't. You don't think about how there's no common use of the word. Somebody owns it.
Right.
And you just probably didn't know.
Right. And you know what? The best advice for somebody, a company or a business owner that's going to look to use a phrase or a word that might be identified with somebody else, you might have heard it before. It's very easy. You go to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office and you conduct an online search. You don't even need to pay a lawyer for that. You can do that yourself. Obviously you pay a lawyer, you probably get a more extensive search, but even just a cursory look might help you in a dispute. So I would suggest that's where you go before you decide to use a phrase or a name. Check that out first.
Sure. Yeah, very easy tool to use. Or you could always go to Be a Good Client and get the book.
Yeah, no, seriously though. I mean, really, again, just talking about that beasmartclient.com one more time. This is the kind of thing where, if you're going to be hiring a lawyer to engage in a trademark search, you need to know, well, what is that lawyer going to do for me? How do I communicate with him? How do I make sure that we're on the same page and that when he's doing the search, I know what I'm getting in return? What am I paying for? What am I getting? What is he going to give me? What is he going to do? And that's where really, in all seriousness, something like Be a Smart Client is so important. And that's why I think that it's really kind of a must read for anybody that is going to be hiring an attorney for anything, including something like trademark work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you can compare to what you expect from a lawyer versus what you can do on your own.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe there's no need to buy one. There you go. Save yourself a little bit of money by buying a simple book.
Yep.
It's that easy. Oh, we'll see how that one shakes out. Get it shaken, stirred.
Got it.
All right. Thank you.
We'll be here all week.
EU lawyers. Yeah, that's right. Thanks, Try the Veal. EU lawmakers blasted for refugee response. European Council President Donald Tusk ripped fellow lawmakers over the EU's response to the Syrian refugee crisis in an invitation letter to join him in a special session to tackle the issue. The crisis we are all witnessing is a test of our humanity and responsibility. It causes many tensions and accusations among politicians and people in Europe. I have no illusions that Europe will deal with this challenge for many years to come, Tusk said in a letter to EU Council members sent late Friday. More than 200,000 refugees, most of them escaping the civil war in Syria and ISIL, have flooded into Hungary alone this year. The European Commission said Friday that over 210,000 people applied for asylum in the EU in the second quarter of 2015, up 85% over the same period for last year. The crush of refugees and Hungary's unwillingness to deal with them has caused a domino effect at neighboring borders this week. Although the 1995 Schengen Agreement broke down borders across much of Europe, Germany earlier this week raised controls along its frontier with Austria. And Austria followed suit by closing its border with Hungary. Hungary, meanwhile, closed its borders as well as declaring a state of emergency while it finished a 109-mile razor wire fence at its frontier with Serbia. Now, Tusk acknowledged the grave difference of opinion across the EU on what the continent should do about the refugee crisis, but he said staying the course would solve nothing. The current migration policy is a sum of despair of the victims fleeing war and persecution, of the determination in searching for a better life, of the cynicism of the smugglers, and too often of the refugees and migrants' tragic fate. Therefore, it's essential to establish a credible European migration policy. Tusk said the most urgent issues involve getting help to frontline states, the Western Balkans and Turkey, budgetary assistance for the Refugee Commissioner, and diplomatic pressure to solve the Syrian crisis once and for all. Ta-da, who thought that one? He also called on lawmakers to give immediate funding to the World Food Program, which has already cut substantially food support to refugees. The program currently feeds 11 million people in Syria and the surrounding region. Special session of the EU Council is set for September 23rd. This thing is a mess over there, obviously.
Yeah, you know, I was surprised because you hear it on the news and you see it. But just this week, my son had come home from school. He's in 8th grade, and he was given a project, and he was told to compare this crisis with the Holocaust and the refugees that were fleeing during World War II, and to make a determination as to whether or not you think the world is doing enough for the refugees. And I was, at first it was like, okay, yeah, that I don't really see the correlation. And I know that there have been a lot of sort of right-wing rabbis who are making comparisons. But then when I sat down with him to do the project, I was really surprised to see some of the comparisons, because we're not talking necessarily about the time period in Nazi Germany when people were in the death camps, but more importantly, the time period when people were fleeing Germany for safety, and they were being turned away by other countries. And then ultimately, as they come back into Germany, they're picked up and put into death camps and work camps and that sort of thing. And I was watching video with him of, these Syrian refugees trying to board trains, and they're jumping through the windows. And you have to wonder and worry, what is the long-term repercussion of this? Because when World War I started and World War II started, nobody could see it. It wasn't something that, World War I, the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand, nobody said, oh, that's it, here we go. And here you have to wonder, what is this going to lead to? You've got people putting up barbed wire fences. You've got people that are suffering. Where does this go? This is kind of scary.
That's an interesting comparison, because there was a similar issue. I think is it more or less, when you talk about the comparison of that, and I look at it and I see it, I have my own extreme right-wing views of it, but I look at the Syrian civil war as not so much a lot of a government against a particular group of people as it is a bunch of factions fighting for control of an area.
Yeah.
It's pretty ugly over there, and it's Iraq has the same problem. The worst thing we ever could have done with Iraq was try to depose Saddam Hussein, but that's a whole different argument. But it did lead to a lot of destabilization in the region, in a region that really can't handle historically destabilization. It's a big discussion, but in the nearer term, what do you do with all these people? My extreme right version is to hand them weapons, tell them to go back and fight for their land. But
yeah,
not a lot of people would agree with me on that. The governments in the area, I mean, for crying out loud, going to Greece, good idea? Probably not. Greece can't afford its own citizens right now. Yeah. This is, and actually, what was the answer to here? Let's backtrack historically. What was the answer to the Jewish crisis in Germany? The end result answer.
The end result was that it took a world war to fix the problem.
To create Israel.
Well, yeah, but there's, yes.
Yeah,
that's right.
But you are right. It took a large-scale military involvement to, and you can't just say that. Well, that was the whole crux of the issue. Obviously, Hitler had greater aspirations than just kicking the Jews out of Germany. He wanted he wanted to reinstate the Rhineland or something to that effect. He had world domination theories, as did Japan. I mean, you take Japan, they invaded China for crying out loud. But the thing that came out of World War II was the creation of Israel. Yeah. Is that what's going to happen here? They're going to have to create God knows how many countries to satisfy the different sex and tribal history and leanings of these people. I don't know the answer. I don't know if there is an answer. We can't. The governments that the U.S. can't take them all. Europe can't take them all. You can't just. That's like saying, okay, we're moving all these people out of this field, and we have only some places to go. So many houses to put them in. But we're going to keep this field. It's just going to be nothing from now on. It's going to be a wasteland because that's what's being created there. Creating a region of land that will be good for nothing. No inhabitation will happen over there.
And look, I mean, you can argue, you can argue that the creation of Israel destabilized the region even more so because it's the only it's the only non-Muslim or Arab country surrounded on all sides by Muslim and Arab countries. And what are you going to do in Syria? Yeah. Because if you were to say, let's split Syria up, you're going to have rival factions continuing to fight. I don't know that there is an easy solution to this, but it certainly seems like there's no end in sight. And here's a situation where, can lawmakers even do anything about this? And I say no. And this is one of those areas where the law really has no bearing at this point because things are spiraling out of control. And what do you expect? If you're Greece, do you really feel as though you're obligated to accept people in when it's going to cause further financial difficulty for your own country? So it's really tough because there's that humanity side, that moral side versus we have to take care of our own country because we are spiraling out of control. And now with the influx of all of these refugees, what is that going to do for us? So you feel for them on the human end. You can't have them in your country because of the financial aspects, and lawmakers can say whatever they want, but no law can fix this, in my opinion.
No, it has to be fixed at the source, and whether or not it's going to be as a great. I mean, there are 5 different controlling factions in Syria right now. You have the government, you have the rebels, you have the Kurds, you have Al Nusra, and then you have the Islamic State, all claiming parts of Syria. If everybody said, okay, let's stop the war today, and you guys all get to keep the land you've got, no one's going to be happy with that.
No. I mean,
that's not going to happen.
Nope, absolutely not. It's going to be like the Palestinians and the Israelis, and the Gaza Strip will be just strewn throughout Syria. You almost have to wonder, from an extremist hypothetical, what would be the way to solve this? Would it be, hey, And this is where it gets kind of scary. Does a UN military force come in and say, you're destabilizing not just the region, but the entire world, and we're going to come in and we're going to show some military might, and we're going to, we're talking about the UN, but that could be frightening because now you've got more of a global military response in the UN. And that whole thing, for people out there that are conspiracy theorists and stuff, the New World Order and this idea of the UN being a military force as opposed to a peacekeeping operation is frightening. But is that what has to happen? Does somebody have to say, listen, if you're going to continue to destabilize the world, we have the right to go in and force you to do something in order to save the world? Because if you go back in time to the American Civil War, there was a ripple effect that occurred in Europe, but not to the extent that I think the Syrian refugee crisis and that civil war is having on all of Europe.
No, not even close. And you have the makings here. If you were to look at it from the standpoint that you just described it, what the solution is, you have the makings of World War III.
Yeah,
honestly. I mean, and that's every person quoting the Bible is going to say, in the days I told you so. But you really have that where it is going to be the rest of the world against a group of people that are beating themselves up.
Yeah, no, it's true.
And that's the sad part about it. And how do you fix it? That's like saying, like you say, I have a family down the street, and gosh, all they do is fight with each other, and we're getting sick of it. So now we're going to go in as a neighborhood and force them to get along. Oh, and by the way, you have to stay in the same house.
Yeah.
And we're going to stand outside here and make sure you do it. That is the parallel to that. I mean, you want to make it simplistic, but that's exactly what it is. You have a group of people who are basically all related.
You can find them all to their own bedrooms. Yeah, stick them all in their own bedrooms and see how long they're going to stay there.
Yeah, exactly. Eventually, someone's going to be knocking on the wall too hard, and then the other person's going to get mad because they can't listen to their music, and then they're going to fight. Yep. So it's. I don't want to say it's unsolvable, but the solution lies within, and they're never going to find it.
No, but when you look at, I think you're right with the reference to possible the next big conflict, because most civil wars, they don't have that ripple effect that can touch all parts of the globe, and this seems to be on its way, if not there already, to being able to really impact everything.
Oh, right. In the extremist side on the outside looking at this is saying, look, all you people, you don't want to be there either. But the problem is you're bringing your problems with you because your ideological world is not staying behind. You've got people from every walk of life that are fighting now with each other in Syria, leaving Syria, and they're going to live in Greece or in Germany or in Austria or in Hungary. And they're not going to stop fighting. They're just going to do it somewhere else.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
That's what the rest of the, that's what I believe, and that's what I'm sure a lot of people believe, and I think that's exactly what happens.
Yeah.
But only time will tell, unfortunately, and then at what time will it be too late? But that's our political discussion for the day. Wow. But in all honesty, though, legally there's nothing. I mean, they talk about the Schengen Agreement, and there's nothing, even that agreement coming into play. From a standpoint of what European Union can and can't do, because it was an agreement signed by 5 of the 10 members of the EU, and it was basically proposed the gradual abolition of border checks between countries. And so now they're putting those borders back in place, but not because of the citizens of those particular countries.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see how that plays into it at all, or they say, well, it's a state of emergency and we're going to do it anyway, and too bad.
Yeah.
So
and that's probably where it's going.
Legally, I can't see a judge coming. Yeah, there's not going to be a judge in the world's going to reverse that.
Nope.
Oh, radio duo, no, not us, sued for drug sale accusations. Radio host lied on the air, saying that a father used his now closed New York meat market to sell large quantities of marijuana for his son, which was caught. The father is claiming in court. Michael Amalfi Sr. sued WAIO-FM Radio 95.1, two of its hosts and its owner, iHeartMedia Incorporated, in a Monroe County, New York Supreme Court on September 9th. Now, Amalfi, who now lives in Broward County, Florida, apparently he's older and retired, says he was born and raised in the Rochester, New York area where WAIO is located. For many years, he worked with his father, Charles, and his two brothers in the family meat market, aptly named Amalfi's, according to the complaint. Now, the business, which closed around 2000, was the subject of WAIO's Kimberly and Beckany afternoon broadcast on May 13, 2015, Amalfi says. The show is hosted by defendants Kimberly Ray and Barry Beck. The lawsuit states, the pair began to discuss a news story regarding the plaintiff's son, Michael Amalfi Jr., who had pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit money laundering and traffic in drugs for selling marijuana between 2010 and 13, according to the complaint. After incorrectly asserting that the money laundering and marijuana sales took place at the Brighton restaurant on East Avenue, a business which Michael Amalfi Jr. had been involved, the program host proceeded to impugn the plaintiff, the lawsuit states. Ray allegedly stated that Amalfi's son is free on $50,000 bail because I think Daddy, Michael Amalfi Sr., has buku bucks. His family used to own a meat market on North Avenue and Portland Avenue in the city. He sold pounds of marijuana, I would say allegedly. Amalfi claimed the host went on to say, not pounds of steak, but pounds of dope, allegedly. Beck and Ray later made categorical but false statement of fact, the lawsuit says as well. For instance, Ray said the Amalfis grew up to run the Brighton and to use it as a drug and money laundering front. The complaint states the host allegedly added, I don't think they were selling little bits. I think they were selling large quantities. To clarify, Ray said, you're not going to have 50 people come up and buy a dime bag from whatever, according to the complaint. Now, Amalfi claims Beck responded by saying, let's just call it the BJ's of marijuana sales, referring to the National Wholesale Club. Amalfi says their claims are not true. The plaintiff has never been engaged in the sale of marijuana or any other illicit substances. Amalfi's meat market was not an outlet for the merchandising of marijuana, either in small quantities or large quantities, as the program hosts claim. Amalfi seeks an unspecified amount of damages for defamation. He is represented by Donald O'Brien Jr. of Woods, albeit Gilman LLP in Rochester. The defendants have yet to return a request for comment to Courthouse News. So Courthouse News telling us all about the story, but the bottom line is whether or not these people in radio can make a statement, true or false, and get away with it, whether it's in entertainment or not. Is it really defamation?
Well, I think it really depends on what sources they were referring to, because if they were looking at something that's a published source and they are repeating, I mean, that would be the equivalent of, we just read this story. Are we responsible for some sort of defamatory action? The answer to that is no, because we're relying on a news source and we're talking about what's gone on here. So if these hosts had a copy of an indictment, something that they could go back and say, listen, I'm only telling you what I read, and then I'm injecting some of my opinion on it, but I don't know enough about what they relied on. I think, though, that this is a very dangerous thing for the radio host to have engaged in, because I don't know that any of what they've said has any bearing in reality. I don't know that they can back up any of it, because you just look at the comments that were made, and it seems like, to say some of the things that they said, that there's no sort of journalistic immunity for that. That just seems to be stupidity. That would be like calling somebody out, especially because this isn't Brad Pitt, where if you put yourself in the public light, then, you deserve or you expect some criticism. So if we're talking about Brad Pitt and we don't like his shoes that he wore at an award show, that's different. That's our opinion. But here, you're really sort of impugning somebody's credibility. You're trying to destroy, because there's no other reason for the comment. You're trying to destroy that person's reputation in the community. So I think that these people, the radio show hosts, might have some liability. It's going to come down to what they can prove. What did they rely on? Is it purely opinion, or is it so filled with conjecture that it ultimately ends up being a false statement that causes harm to the plaintiff?
Well, sure, when they say that he's free on $50,000 bail because I think Daddy has buku bucks, now you're insinuating, or would appear to insinuate, that you are saying the only reason he got a $50,000 bail is because his dad has big money. You know, and then, of course, because they throw in allegedly a couple times because he sold pounds of marijuana, I would say allegedly, and not pounds of steak, but pounds of dope, allegedly. You know, they direct it back a couple times, and you're right. It seems less in the world of jest and more in the world of spite.
Yeah.
And I mean, you know, I mean, you can make fun of people all you want within the realm of truth, but when you start, like you said, you know, start voicing your opinion to the point that something else is afoot, then maybe that's where they're going to have problems.
Yeah, I mean, we're all entitled to our opinions, and we can speak our opinion, but when your opinion starts to have a negative effect, a damaging effect on somebody's reputation or business, then that's no longer your opinion, because now your opinion is sort of edged with a sword. And that's where I think that the line has to be drawn here. So the fact that, and I love that when people say allegedly, yeah, I mean, that's a journalistic sort of go-to term.
Get a jail-free card.
Yeah, I mean, when I was studying journalism in college, that was like allegedly. I mean, everything. You know, my name. I'm Peter Lamont. Allegedly, to cover yourself, but that only works when you really are referring to an alleged comment made by another source. If your opinion is, you know, this guy blew up the World Trade Center allegedly, well, where is that allegedly referring to? Something you read online or something you concocted in your head? And that's where I think this starts to go far afield.
Yeah. Yeah, allegedly would probably refer to someone else saying it first, or someone reporting it. You know, that's why we always try to remember to list our sources.
Yep. Words to live by.
Courthouse News. That's right. Courthouse News is a big source for us, and they will tell us right now in Manhattan, government workers balking at new WTC digs. Fears of terrorism drove 6 employees from the General Services Administration to file a federal lawsuit seeking a court order preventing that agency's move to the newly rebuilt World Trade Center. Tasked with the basic function of U.S. government buildings, the GSA currently maintains an office at 26 Federal Plaza, a little more than a mile away from its new offices on 6 different levels of the Freedom Tower. Now, Lawrence Tomska, who became president of his local GSA union in 1988, says that his memories of the September 11, 2001 attacks on the Twin Towers and the Pentagon still make him shudder today, and especially when he sees low-flying planes. He now leads a group of 6 Doty workers at the agency, describing their new offices as a target for terrorists, in a lawsuit asking a federal judge to break the agency's lease. They sued the GSA and its administrator, Denise Turner Roth, in a 16-page complaint filed in Manhattan federal court. Co-plaintiff Jonathan Williams, a vice president of the agency's local union, worries that the move will aggravate his high blood pressure and stress, according to the 16-page complaint. Priscilla Rosario, program analyst for GSA, says she experiences severe trepidation as she contemplates the proposed move because she lost a godfather in a 9/11 attacks. Peter Davis, a marketing specialist for the agency, griped that the office space roughly halfway up the 104-story tower could trigger his vertigo and fear of heights. The fact that the proposed offices are on the 55th floor further would make evacuation difficult, if not impossible, due to limitations in his ability to walk down such a significant number of stairs. It says, GSA, I'm going to do some quick math for you here, Peter. The GSA spent $351 million on a $350 million on a 20-year lease. It signed in July 2012. That's $1.7 million a year. I'm in the wrong business. I need to lease to the government. This expense was entirely unnecessary because there already is vacant space at the GSA's current office, the lawsuit says. The lawsuit alleges the GSA failed to get congressional authorization and sidestepped numerous internal directives to prevent waste and abuse in government. It is on the basis that the workers seek a judgment setting aside the lease as an abuse of Abuse of discretion. Now, their attorney, who's based in Astoria, New York, noted in a phone interview with CN that there have been several congressional people who have complained about this particular lease. Though the Pentagon, for instance, lost 125 victims in the attacks, roughly 23,000 show up at the building every day and more than 100,000 visits annually. Rhodes differentiated his clients from those workers, though. GSA employees are not administrative employees. They are they are administrative employees. They aren't military employees. The GSA did not immediately respond to a request for comment. So basically they're saying, I don't like where my company's working, so I don't want to go to work there, and I want the court system to tell them they have to find someplace else to put me.
Yeah.
A mentor of mine once told someone, wow, if you don't like that, quit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do they actually have a case here? I mean, I feel bad for these people and the things that they've gone through. But for crying out loud, if you don't like it, quit.
I think this is kind of it's really unbelievable and sort of frustrating because, you know, when I worked down on Wall Street during 9/11 and shortly after the cleanup began, we ended up moving because they were offering incentives for companies that were moving closer to the World Trade Center site. We ended up moving directly across from the trade centers. And I remember going to work, you could still see the rubble that was left over. I mean, we're talking maybe 8 months, 6, 7, 8 months after 9/11. But it was, you know, early 2002, things were still a mess. And I didn't say, you know, well, I don't want to be here and maybe I'll start a lawsuit because I don't think that it's appropriate to move your office across from the trade center. And you know, that's, I mean, think about it. As a private employee in a private company, would anybody ever think to do that? Yet here in the government, it's like, well, we work for the government, so, you know, the government shouldn't be allowed to do that. I think this is a stupid case. Stupid, because you know what? The other thing, too, is... No, what were you going to say?
Oh, I say, this equates to me, if I were I didn't like my school that I went to when I was a kid because I was bullied or picked on or whatever, and I worked for a company and that company decides to move its headquarters across from that school, I don't want to go to work anymore because I have a bad experience across the street. Yeah, I don't like Mondays either. So yeah, you know,
if you don't want to work there, look, I can understand not wanting to work there. That's not the issue. I mean, I could certainly understand being traumatized. You know, I mean, for me, quite frankly, I don't know that I'd want to work there after being in that experience, you know, on September 11th. I don't think I'd want to work there, but I'm not going to go file a lawsuit. I'm going to say, look, I really don't want to work there. It's traumatizing. I'm not going to try to force you and waste taxpayers' dollars on this lawsuit. I just wouldn't work there.
And you're an attorney, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
That's your first go-to.
That's right.
Sue you. I'm just kidding. But in all honesty, yeah, this is. I will be interested to see if this makes it past the. I don't know what's the first phase in the civil suit. It's not discovery, but it isn't, is it?
Well, on the pleading stage, it could just be dismissed and a motion to dismiss. Yeah, I don't see this going anywhere. On top of which, when you think about trying to bring industry and companies back down to 9/11 or to ground zero. You know, how great does this sound? Hey, you want to come and work for us? Well, no, it's the government's being sued because the workers don't want to live down there or work down there. I just think it's stupid. I get it from an emotional standpoint, but come on.
I don't work for a lion trainer because I don't like the fact they train lions. That's why I don't do it.
Yep. Well, that makes sense.
I don't want to get eaten by the lion. You'd like to think, wouldn't you? Yeah. Well, this last story, of course, unfortunately upsetting, but it raises an interesting question. Unfortunately, a baby has died after being left in an SUV in a Florida school parking lot. 6-month-old baby left in an SUV at a Florida middle school was found dead Friday afternoon, authorities said. A teacher at Deltona Middle School who was caring for the child inadvertently left the boy in a car seat in the back row of an SUV, the Volusia County Sheriff's Office has said. The Sheriff's Office received a 911 call at 3:54 p.m. That's the time school gets out, folks. And a school resource officer was sent to the vehicle but it was too late. The sheriff's major case unit was assigned to the case. Temperatures in Central Florida, obviously in the mid-80s on Friday afternoon. Aerial video showed the SUV in a parking lot with a partition next to the passenger doors. The vehicle has tinted windows, but there are no trees to provide shade. Deltona is about 50 miles north of Orlando. The question here is, this doesn't sound like it was the teacher's child.
No.
Is there a defense here that, and I'm not absolutely not excusing the fact that what she did here, I mean, it's horrible and she never should have forgotten. But is it reasonable to believe that because it's not her everyday job caring for this child, that she actually just could have forgotten?
Well, I think this, okay? I think that let's assume for a minute that this case will be prosecuted and the teacher gets prosecuted for what she did to the child. In my opinion, I don't care whether you are a single person that has never changed a baby. If you're going to accept responsibility for a child, then you have to rise to that standard. And this,
absolutely,
even though it might not have been intentional, this clearly was so grossly negligent. I mean, it's one thing to leave your keys in the car. It's another thing to leave a living thing in the car, especially a child. I mean, how could you forget? But now see how far this could go. So if you're being prosecuted, could the prosecutor also say to the mother, wait a minute, you entrusted your child to this woman who you knew was a teacher.
Wow.
Right? And then you say, you have some responsibility here too. You were negligent in entrusting your child to this woman. And does that negligence have a parallel criminal charge? You know, is it a child endangerment case because you left her with somebody that maybe wasn't qualified? So I could almost see it being, well, let's say you leave your kid with a drug addict and you know the person's a drug addict. Is that a possible child endangerment case because you left your kid with a drug addict? I would say yes. So the drug addict could be held responsible, and so could you. Here's interesting, because we don't know enough about the teacher. Why was this woman watching the baby? What did the mother know about this person watching the baby? So maybe the mother has no liability here, but it certainly is something that a prosecutor is going to want to look at and say, what is the chain of events here that led to this woman having the baby? But there's no excuse for the woman. And I think that the woman, unfortunately, when you take that responsibility, you then shoulder the burden of acting as a reasonable person. And I think that, you know, it's possible that you could get an involuntary manslaughter conviction out of something like this.
Wow. Sure. Yeah, I mean, it certainly doesn't absolve her of any responsibility. But I was curious as to could there be reasonable, you know, I guess it depends on the jury.
I think it depends on the jury, and I think it depends on, I mean, I vaguely recollect other cases where people left their children in the car and the kids got very sick, you know, near death, and they had to be hospitalized. And I don't want to say they were excused, because that's not the right terminology, but they weren't convicted of a crime for some sort of intervening event, whether it was an emergency situation or something like that. But I don't know, and I don't know what the involuntary manslaughter or child endangerment laws are in Florida. But in light of all the things that happen in Florida involving children and their caretakers, I would tend to think that a court is going to come down a little bit hard on this, as opposed to, you know, going the lenient route.
Sure. Yeah. No, especially in Florida. And that'll be interesting to see. I mean, obviously this woman that was a teacher will never teach again.
Yeah, really. I mean, could you imagine you're entrusting your kids with her at school and this woman's not, it's really sad and tragic, but I mean, come on. I mean, isn't your job to take care of kids in a way?
Exactly. Yeah. As I was looking for more information on this story today, going a little bit off topic, I was the Ruby Bella story that's coming out of Boston.
Yeah.
And there's a CNN article that talks about how the woman, and I don't call her a mother because she's not, the woman who gave birth to this child had 2 other children removed from her home prior to this one.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't help but think, wow, the government wants to regulate who I can marry, but if they can take away my kids, I could just go make more.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. Exactly right.
The battles you fight because you can win versus the battles you need to fight, I suppose.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Well,
that's where I'll leave it.
All right. That's gonna we'll wrap that up on a positive note. Great.
Yeah.
So we've accomplished establishing World War III and babies dying in cars.
Yes,
Great.
I think that's good.
We're off to a good Monday.
Well, exactly.
Well,
the World War III thing is the worst thing to come out of it.
That's right.
Baby thing will be small. Yeah, and that's the sad thing. You start talking about that whole Syria thing, and you see the pictures of the kids and families coming across. And I'm sure you know people that have come for that reason. I know a fellow here in the area that I live that his mom got him out of Iraq in the 80s, and that was when Saddam was well in power.
Yeah.
Smuggled him through Jordan and got him to the U.S. Yeah. So I mean, nobody wants to be over there. They really don't. It's that bad. And that's the problem. You have a piece of land that nobody wants to live on for various reasons, mostly involved in the human issue, and fix the problem.
Yeah.
Don't worry about Don't worry. The problem is what it is over there. So
absolutely.
You're going to have land over there that no one's going to want to inhabit. So.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's
man.
a bit of a downer. Well, on a
What's going on
positive
this
note,
week?
yeah. On a positive note, if you need help trying to communicate with your attorney, you can always go to beasmartclient.com and you can pick up their book and the resource workbook, which is also a great thing to take a look at to help you communicate better with your attorney. It's a really good resource in all seriousness, and I really would encourage you to pick it up. It's completely affordable and very helpful. So check that out. You can check it out at beasmartclient.com or check it out on Amazon. We've got a lot of things going on this week. We've got some pre-recorded interviews that we're going to be doing and then airing later. We've got Lori Cheek coming back on the show. So we've got a lot of exciting things going on. We're also working on some brand new things coming up in the fall, some meet and greets and some things that we're going to do hopefully throughout the country, maybe down in Florida. And I'm hoping maybe we can get together with Mike Burnett of the Beard Bro, because he was really, from an entrepreneur's standpoint, a lot of really valuable information. So we'll, going to keep you updated on that. But I think that there's a lot of things in the works. We've got an also a possible meetup in New Jersey with Kevin Knight, who is the owner of that wonderful wrestling school that we talk about a lot. And he's been on the show before. He's trained a lot of the pro wrestlers, and he really has developed such a unbelievable business. We very, very established and experienced entrepreneur. We're going to be getting together, and we're going to be having a sort of a public get-together Q&A where you're going to be able to ask Kevin and I questions about legal stuff and entrepreneurship, and hopefully it'll be educational and as fun for you as it will be for us. So that's all in the works. We're going to keep you updated. You can really find everything at UTLRadio.com and news and updates. We're also going to be revamping the site as well, thanks to all of your feedback. Feedback is a really great thing, and I really do appreciate all of you who have commented about the site and the show, and you've let us know what you like and don't like, and we're able to make modifications based on your comments, and I really appreciate it. So keep those comments coming. If there's something you like, let us know. If there's something you don't like, let us know. Just be kind, and we'll make some modifications and hopefully give you exactly what you're looking for. And just remember, we can't please everybody, but we'll do our best. Right, Bob?
That's right. Everyone will not be happy, I guarantee it.
Absolutely. Well, at least we can guarantee something.
Not handing out cupcakes.
That's right. All right, so that's going to do it for today. Tune in tomorrow for legal Q&A. Tune in Wednesday for business Q&A, and then understanding business on Thursday. Bob, you have a great week. We'll be back next week with Business and Legal Week in Review. And any questions, comments, anything, just find us on UTLRadio.com, and we will be glad to answer any questions that you have. Have a great week. I'll see you tomorrow.